everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel BNB Daily Spoiler. Today we are diving into bold and beautiful spoiler that will leave and stun it. Will is absolutely shocked when he comes to face Dylan's father.
Will is shocked when he sees Dylan's father, bold and the beautiful spoilers. Will has been very busy lately. He has had meetings at Spencer Publications, an unexpected interest in mentoring a young designer, and the constant task of trying to be there for his kid. Will is surprised to see Dylan's dad. He would rather think that the previous restlessness had turned into something more stable. Friendship, work, and being responsible were the three main pillars. He didn't expect the night to go the way it did. Dylan McAvoy came by a little later than usual, but he had that half-smile that said he didn't mind being there. Will had known Dylan on and off for years. They were both tough guys, but they had a surprising amount of empathy for each other, which made them strange friends. Will liked Dylan because he had seen Dylan turn the pieces he was given into a life, not because it was easy. Will smiled as Dylan walked through the crowd, greeting people with his guarded kindness. Will's smile stopped when Dylan's face changed to something he had never seen before. Dylan's eyes narrowed and his jaw got tight. He looked away from the small group of old friends he had joined and toward the back of the room. Will looked where he was looking. When Will saw the man next to the big staircase, the music in his head stopped. His suit fit like armor, his hair had a silver edge, and he wasn't a kid. However, it was his face, the identical deep-set eyes and angular nose as in a childhood photo Will remembered, that hit Will with the power of identification. A picture of a man whose name had always caused people to shift the topic and who was never discussed in the proper manner. Hayes, Victor. When Will was younger, he had once seen the photo hidden in his mother's closet under other frames. When he asked, his mother gave him the look he had learned to read, a mix of fear and obstinate protectiveness. Not tonight, Will, she had remarked at the time. Later had never materialized. It felt like a physical blow to realize that Victor, the guy who had been more of an accusation than a person during those framed years, was there across the room, breathing the same air as his kid. Dylan remained still. He gazed as though he had discovered a ghost. The man who had been absent and the man whose life had been impacted by his absence were the only two people in the room for a split second. People began to take notice. Like flowers closing at sunset, conversations faltered and folded inward. Before he could choose not to, Will pushed through the throng. Beyond curiosity and the old need to defend those he loved, he had no plan. Victor Hayes seemed older than Will had remembered up close, but there was a frightening clarity in his eyes. He was the type of man who seemed to be either full of plans or full of excuses. Soaptown seldom provided obvious alternatives, therefore Will didn't appreciate that distinction. Dylan, Victor muttered. His tone was supposed to be gentle, but it had a hint of something Will could not identify, a practiced calmness or years of prepared sorrow. A long time has passed. Dylan gave a breath in return. He declared, "You have no right." Not in the first syllable, no rage. Just cold calculation, the kind that didn't take surprise into account. The room held its breath as Will tried to intervene and say something polite and helpful. Dylan's eyes flicked to Will when he cleared his throat and moved closer, showing recognition and a glimpse of their shared private code. "Will," Dylan murmured. "Why are you in this place?" Will blinked after immediately telling him, "You invited me." "I mean, the gala, correct?" He trailed off because the situation's logic was flawed. He made himself concentrate. "This is," he said, pointing to Victor. "Someone I didn't anticipate seeing." Victor turned to face Will and bowed his head slightly in a traditional manner. "Mr. Spencer," he murmured. "William." Will's lips became parched. The name was courteous, but there was something about the voice that made Will's stomach turn. Will recognized Victor's mouth and the angle of his cheek from a folded picture of his mother laughing with a man he had only ever been told was a friend. That picture had been a silent, perilous thing. The memory returned with a subtle scent of lemon soap and perfume. "Are you familiar with him?" Though the idea of Victor and Dylan, father and son, suddenly fell together with the same straightforward logic that occasionally made a jigsaw fall into place, Will heard himself ask. The man could be here for a dozen reasons, none of them minor. Yes, Dylan replied succinctly. He's my dad. In tiny, polite bites, the gathering did not know how to react to such a message. It sent out rings of incredulity and landed like a stone in a peaceful pond. Suddenly, Will's entire childhood, the closed-off boxes of the past, seemed to have an open lid. Your dad? Will said it again because the word turned the evening into something he had never anticipated. The figure he had seen in the picture had been a mystery shrouded in adult murmurs. There was now a face to that secret. As though he had practiced his defense in too many mirrors, Victor's jaw tensed. I am aware that I vanished, he declared. I have my motivations. Dylan's laugh sounded nasty and dry. Why, he sneered. You departed. That is not a justification. That provides an explanation. You made that decision. Will became skeptical when Victor's expression softened. I didn't go because I wanted to. I departed in order to live. Dylan repeated, survive? You abandoned me to fend for myself without a father. It wasn't a conversation for a second. An indictment was made. Will was ashamed of all the secrets families held, believing they were shielding someone. He now realized that secrets were frequently just another type of wound, one that never healed because it was never attended to. An enthusiastic journalist in a satin outfit had already reached for her phone in a nearby nook. Will's skin tingled at the prospect of a headline. But Dylan disregarded the increasing curiosity. He stared at Victor, his gaze penetrating the elder guy. Why now? He insisted. Victor took a swallow. He said, because I can't keep running. Because I discovered something last year that convinced me I couldn't ignore this. Because I have a duty to tell my son the truth. Dylan yelled, the truth? You had 12 years to figure that out. In spite of himself, Will moved closer. Lately, he had been holding on to words for both himself and his son. Conversational spills weren't his preferred drama. Perhaps we ought to, he began. Dylan angrily responded, no, and Will finally complied. Dylan was establishing a line, not seeking allies. Victor stood there as if he didn't really get the concept of boundaries. For a moment, Victor's eyes softened into what appeared to be grief as he glanced past Dylan. Finally, he said, there was a car. A long time ago. I've lived with a car, 2 people, and a mistake. Will felt the blood drain from his face. The crash that had changed the map of a dozen lives was something he had only ever seen as an empty space in family albums, and the words fit too closely around it. Memory surfaces scrambled for air, and his chest clenched. A vehicle? Will reiterated. The melody of the string quartet faded, and the room appeared to tilt. Which vehicle? Whose vehicle? Victor's hands clenched at his sides. He lowered his voice to the point where Will's breath caught as he said, it involves someone you know. A member of your family. Uncontrollably, Will's thoughts raced through the faces of his father, mother, and other family members who had left little, unsaid holes in their stories. He had the impression that a life based on omissions could resemble a house of cards. Dylan's expression became motionless, showing more shock than rage. You're saying, he started. Victor gave a nod. I'm saying I was there the night your mother's car, he said, pausing due to the memory's weight. I believe that by keeping my distance, I could put things right. I was mistaken. To stabilize himself, Will's hands grabbed the back of a chair. He had long attempted to divide the past into tiny little boxes, what belonged to him and what to his mother. Like someone opening a fragile product, the new information shattered those boxes. Will told Victor, you were there. It wasn't a rhetorical charge. He was curious about what it meant to be there. He wanted the precise outline of what had been omitted. Victor looked him in the eye. I witnessed the mishap, he stated bluntly. I observed the driver. I was terrified, so I did nothing. I convinced myself that leaving would be preferable. I convinced myself that by fleeing from the outside, I might defend myself from within. I was mistaken. Like a curtain, silence hung. At the room's edge, feet started to shift once more as people adjusted their positions to accommodate the new center of gravity. The air felt too thin, and Will's chest pounded like a drum. "Exactly what are you saying?" Dylan inquired. "You mean a member of Will's family?" Victor cut in with a speed that betrayed more haste than regret. He stated, "I'm saying there are things that connect our families in ways that would complicate life for everyone if they came out. I'm claiming that I wasn't merely an observer." You?" Will reiterated, disbelieving. "You weren't an observer?" A harsh line formed on Victor's lips. "No." He inhaled. "I attempted to conceal a fact that could have endangered others. I reasoned that leaving would be the appropriate thing to do if I could handle it on my own." "By lying?" Will asked in a low voice. "By turning into a ghost in your son's life?" Victor said, "By not letting the truth destroy more lives than it needed to." Now he was begging. "It was pure need, not charm." "I am aware that sounds cowardly." Dylan remarked, "It sounds calculated." His voice had become icy once more. "You seem to have made your own decision." Will felt everything he had believed to be true recalibrate as he glanced from Victor to Dylan. He pictured the empty spaces Will occasionally recognized in his own ancestry, as well as the many nights Dylan had spent telling himself why people had abandoned him. The clash between the two guys in front of him was as much about identification as it was about wrongs done in the past. Will eventually remarked, "You said something connects our families, since sometimes the only way to deal with a secret is to reveal it and see what comes out. What are you discussing?" Victor's eyes were damp when he looked up after they had lowered for a heartbeat. He declared, "There was insurance fraud. And dangers. I was surrounded by men who had no qualms about causing harm to others. They were involved in ways that endangered my presence at the scene when the crash occurred. I reasoned that leaving would protect my son from them. I reimbursed them. I said a falsehood. I believed I could control it. I was mistaken." The words hit hard. Will had a different kind of shock. Not only was he personally betrayed, but there was also a chance that their lives had been tainted by ugly things. They were never clean for long when secrets like that came to light. "You bought them off?" Will reiterated. It seemed disgusting to think that someone had used money to purchase silence, and that decision had influenced years of absence. With a raspy voice, Victor added, "I paid whoever I had to. I did what I believed would save my loved ones. They were not saved by it. My skin was rescued by it." An ancient hurt creased Dylan's face. "So you made your own decision," he repeated. "You left me with the cost of your safety because you decided to be safe." Will felt as though his ribs had been boxed. In order to force a fair exchange of truth and apology as well as some tidy closure, he intended to grip both guys and shake reason into them. However, soap operas seldom had satisfying conclusions. It featured cliffhangers, escalations, reconciliations, and shocks. At last, Dylan folded his arms and murmured, "You shouldn't have come here." His tone was definitive for the first time since the conflict began. "Not right now. Not in public. If this, what you say, is to be handled at all, it must be done in secret." Victor appeared to have been struck. He nodded slowly, but the gesture conveyed more inevitability than consent. He said, "I heard you were in town, so I came. Because I wanted to talk to you without time getting in the way. I'm not pleading for pardon. I would like an opportunity to clarify." Dylan's jaw was clenched, but he made one small nod, indicating that he might be open to listening, later, away from the cameras and aperitifs. "Later," Dylan replied. "Not in this location." Will felt a curious affinity with the man who had chosen to be absent in order to survive as he watched Dylan go, his posture closed but not completely shattered. He was aware that he ought to depart, pack up the night, and allow others to act as though their worlds were still perfect. Rather, Will waited and observed the two until they vanished into the quiet of the grounds. Outside, the city shimmered like a promise under an uncaring sky. Will considered how the ocean continued to both absorb and reveal things in equal measure, as well as all the mysteries that sleep makes possible. With icy precision, he understood that the revelation of the evening would not stay on a private strand. Old foundations would be scrutinized because of the notion that Victor Hayes had been involved in their lives' architecture, either via action or omission. The Forrester Gala would be the beginning rather than the conclusion. The trio went back inside and resumed as if nothing had happened. However, there was a silence that tasted of both possibility and fear in between the notes. Before midnight, Will departed, his mind overflowing with pictures he was unable to reorganize, the picture in his mother's closet, Victor's tattered suit, and Dylan's shadow drifting away in the darkness. He was aware that he needed to get ready for Dylan, the truth, and whatever this elderly man's admission would do to the flimsy homes that people had constructed. Additionally, he was aware that families in their community had to recreate themselves in order to survive, choose which wreckage to save and which to let go. Will texted a trusted person as he entered the cold night, saying, "We need to talk tomorrow. Not in this location." He didn't specify who he meant, Dylan, his family, or his allies, because there were already a lot of words being said tonight. A reckoning would take place. There would be repercussions. And somewhere in the shadows, someone else was already calling a number that would make a personal shock public.